let me show you how I make my absolute favorite sourdough scoring design, the Ric-Rac score. As usual, I'm dumping my dough out of the proofing basket and onto a bread mat. You can use parchment paper or whatever you have at home. Next, I brush off all the excess flour that was left over from the proofing basket and spray it with water to help the new flour stick. I'm using cocoa powder here, but you can use rice flour, all-purpose flour, or even bread flour to make your design pop. I try to cover as much of the dough as possible, but I don't stress if I miss a few spots. I then use dental floss to map out where I'm going to cut into my dough. You can use string or even a toothpick to make these lines on yours. In order for this score to turn out really nicely, you've got to make sure that each of the sections are evenly distributed. I make 9 lines from top to bottom to divide my dough into 10 columns. Then I make 2 lines from left to right to divide my dough into 3 rows. I start with the center line and make 3 long cuts using the rows as my guides. On the line next to it, I'm going to make 4 cuts this time, with the beginning of each cut lining up with the center of the cut in the row beside it. There will also be a smaller cut, more like a half cut, made at the very top and very bottom of the loaf. I'm not sure if this was a shaping issue or if something happened to my dough as I was taking it out of the proofing basket, but I did notice that there was already a cut made in the dough at the bottom here. I attempted to patch it up with a little bit of cocoa powder, but spoiler alert, it ended up separating in the oven. But as you can see, I carried on staggering my scoring slices, alternating between 3 and 4 slices on each line. As I move toward the outer edges of the dough, it does get a little bit more tricky to make these slices because the overall tension of the dough decreases with every slice that's made. What makes this scoring design so tricky is that a properly fermented sourdough loaf expands quite a bit in the oven. Usually, having a big oven spring is a great thing in sourdough baking, but for this particular score, it makes things a lot harder. In order to counteract this, I'm going through each of the sections and doing a second slice right down the middle to make the cuts deeper and allow for more room for expansion. Now I've got to warn you, this score can take anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to get through. Sometimes it's helpful to put your dough into the freezer for the last hour of its cold proof to make sure that your dough is nice and firm and that it stays cold throughout this long score. If you have any questions about this tutorial or you need help with your sourdough baking in general, drop a comment below and I'll try my best to help. Now we finally made it to the end of the scoring and it's time to bake. Here's the loaf 20 minutes into baking when I'm taking off the lid to reveal the absolute beauty that this score is. It stayed in the oven for another 10 minutes but came out looking super golden and absolutely delicious. You've got to give this score a try and let me know how it goes.